So welcome once again to today's session, which is a part of In the Know Bureau Product Showcase series. A topic for this webinar is navigating tariffs and building smarter strategies for a resilient supply chain. I'm Sunny Makhija, Associate Director, Product Marketing at Bureau, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's session. A few housekeeping tips before we dive in. This session is being recorded and we'll share the recording with you afterward. Next, please feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A box at any point. We'll take them up towards the end in a dedicated Q&A segment. And lastly, we'll also run a couple of live polls. So please do participate when those pop up, as it will help us make the session more interactive. Now, coming to our speakers for today, we have with us Antony Vallavanthara and Shailesh Bhadauria. Rather than me reading out their bios, I'll let them briefly introduce themselves. Antony, Shailesh, would you each like to take a moment to say hello to our audience and share a little bit about yourself? Maybe Antony, you can go first if that's all right.
Thanks, Sunny. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Myself, Antony J. Vallavanthara. I am currently working as a product manager specializing in category strategy and insights, where I lead initiatives to build solutions that enable procurement teams to identify opportunities and anticipate risks. Over the past 14 years, I have worked on multiple roles, ranging from research to global sourcing support, wherein I have been supporting Fortune 500 clients in market intelligence and benefits and spend management. Over to you, Shailesh.
Thanks, Antony. I'm Shailesh, everyone. With almost 2 decades of experience in procurement, I specialize in helping businesses understand and manage the real cost of disruptions, whether it's tariff, inflation, or supply risk. At Bureau, I lead the analytics practice where we support procurement leaders with the insights they need to drive smarter, faster, and resilient decisions. Over the last 2 decades, I have worked with a lot of Fortune 500 and 5,000 organizations to help them develop analytics-led strategies that not only protect margins, but also create long-term competitive advantage. I look forward to the discussion today.
Great. Thank you both. It's great to have you here. Now coming to our topic. So over the past 18 months, procurement teams worldwide have been blindsided by tariff shifts, from aluminium and automotive to agriculture and electronics. These sudden changes have caused a number of disruptions across a number of sectors. And let's be honest here, through it all, procurement has been at the very center of the storm. That's why today's session is not just about knowing the tariff landscape, it's about equipping you with practical approaches and strategies to help you stay ahead. So here are the 3 key takeaways you'll walk away with today. First, how to anticipate and quantify tariffs before they erode your margins. Second, practical approaches to mitigate impact, from short-term defenses to medium-term defenses. And third, for long-term, how to build lasting resilience through sourcing location optimization that goes beyond tariffs. Now I would like to hand over the mic to Shailesh, who'll talk about the current tariff landscape and how these tariff changes are directly impacting procurement and supply chains. Over to you, Shailesh.
So like Sunny highlighted, over the past 18 months, tariffs have created multi-million-dollar cost escalation almost overnight. It has exacerbated because of the new government in US, which started from mid of January, and it is kind of still creating a lot of disruptions globally. What I hear most from the clients and prospects today is, first, competitors in other regions now have a pricing advantage. All we do now is renegotiate contracts because of the disturbance that is there. There is a lot of uncertainty about what tariff applies when goods land in the US. Further, critical components suddenly cost 10 to 20% more. Example, there's a blanket tariff of 25% on steel and aluminum from all the countries. And if we combine this with reciprocal tariff, it even leads to 50% tariff in certain cases. Further, procurement teams tell us that they spend more time firefighting tariffs than focusing on the growth. Hence, the themes are very clear here. Tariffs have just not added the cost, it has created chaos and uncertainty. And if procurement waits until the shock hits, it's already going to be too late to react. What we then see in the next slide is what are themes that are coming and emerging very clearly. First, the cost of sourcing has increased drastically. We have seen from different publications that US government is collecting billions of dollars in the first half of this year. It has also disrupted supply chains to the extent that clients are trying to understand whether even sourcing near shore, right from Canada and Mexico, is the right thing to do or not. Further, there's a constant need for renegotiations with the suppliers because for certain countries like China, India, certain South Asian nations, they have seen tariffs ranging between 20% to 40%. Further, there is a lot more strategic pressure now on managing budgeting inflation because tariffs has added more pressure to the cost across the supply chain. Let's do a poll now to understand what our audience feels.
Yes, great idea, Shailesh. Let's do that. As you mentioned, the themes are clear and are being felt globally. So time to make this a little interactive and see what our audience thinks today. You'll soon see a poll question on your screen. So which of these tariff-related challenges has hit your organization hardest in the past 12 to 18 months? We'll wait for around 30 to 40 seconds and we'll then show the results on the screen. So please do take a moment to submit your option. Sudden cost spikes impacting margins, supplier renegotiations triggered by tariff changes, disrupted supply continuity or delayed launches, increased time and effort spent tracking tariffs, or lastly, minimal direct impact so far. I mean, no matter which challenge tops the list, the common theme is clear that tariffs are putting procurement under pressure. So maybe let's wait for 10 more seconds and then we can close this poll because I can still see variation in the numbers. So it's going to get interesting. All right, so let's end the poll here. And please do allow a few moments for your responses to be processed. Okay, so I think supplier renegotiations triggered by tariff changes has topped the list, and quite indeed, every tariff hike seems to trigger a new round of supplier renegotiations, so that makes sense. Now, Shailesh, I would like to come to you for this poll and want to hear your thoughts. How do you see that these results have panned out? If you could please share your feedback here.
Thanks, Sunny. I think this is a wonderful and clear reflection of what's actually happening in the market. A lot of procurement team, right, and buyers, they are actually spending a lot of time in renegotiation, which I just covered right some time back, because suddenly they are seeing a lot more pressure of tariff across countries. It is ranging between 10% to 50% in a lot of cases. And again, now all of this is impacting the sudden cost spikes, which is impacting the margin. So that's naturally becomes the second most leading factor. And similarly, because to understand right what to negotiate, how to negotiate, the category managers need to know what are the tariff and how they're trying to impact the spend. And hence, the second is being shared with the fourth option of our poll, which is also very evident with that. Other two also becomes very important and critical, which we are going to cover in detail in some time.
Great insight, Shailesh. Thank you very much. Maybe you can build on this point and walk us through how tariffs are impacting procurement, which is also our next focus.
Sure, Sunny. So I think let's try to understand right how procurement is under pressure because of the tariff situation. First, there are still a lot of blind spots in the data because the data of spend exists in multiple ERPs in many large organizations, which makes very difficult for the category teams in procurement leadership to get a consolidated view. Then there is a hidden cost escalation because procurement team and sometimes buyers are not able to understand how the tariff which has happened at their contract manufacturers level is impacting the cost. So they need to have roll-up view to understand multi-tier impact, but with no tools to track tariff across countries, it becomes highly difficult for them to quantify the impact. And as Paul indicated, there is a strong pressure on margin because of strong competition. Suddenly, sudden spikes because of tariff has eroded profitability and competitiveness because firms are not able to pass on the increased cost directly to the customers. Then there are supply disruptions which are making delays and uncertainty in product flow because the tariffs has been changing, and what we have seen between say US and Vietnam and between US and India recently. There is a crisis response mode which is making procurement team very difficult and scramble to renegotiate contracts with limited data, which is resulting in organizations absorbing higher costs and making the life very difficult to enable any strategy. And finally, the teams are looking to balance cost, speed, risk, and resilience because ultimately they need to keep in mind how they are aligned with the procurement strategy that they have for the long term.
Great. Thank you, Shailesh. This really sets the context. Antony, let me bring you in here for a moment. We know that tariffs are often seen as short-term pressures. What's your take on how tariffs can actually create lasting impact on sourcing strategy? And how should procurement teams respond to that? Your thoughts, please, on that.
Good question, Sunny. So like Shailesh mentioned, most cases, people look into tariffs as a short-term solution. And we all know that they cause a supply chain disruption and increase in the cost. But what I feel and what I've been seeing or hearing from our users is that seeing or tracking tariffs in the short term alone is a risky business. Because what procurement teams should look into it is they should see this as a signal for a long-term challenges or changes. Now, what could happen is in the long term, certain regions could become structurally not very profitable or unfavorable to continue the business, and which might force the procurement team to rethink on their sourcing footprints. So what I would say is the tariffs are a trigger that should be looked into in the short term, but they also should be smart enough to look into it beyond the short term goals cost and look into it from a long term supply chain resilience.
Great point, Anthony. Thank you for that. Procurement should definitely see tariffs as a trigger and look beyond immediate costs. Now, Shailesh, let's come back to you for the structured three-step approach for managing the tariff volatility. Over to you.
Sure, Sunny. So in Vero, what we are doing is we are trying to help organizations in end-to-end management of tariffs impact. It starts with understanding the tariff monitoring, which is tracking the tariff changes in near real-time basis at a HS code level for your categories and the products that you're buying from different countries. Then in the second step, we are quantifying the impact of those tariffs by overlaying it with your spend data at organization level to see the impact not only at organization, but to a level of by BU, by category, even by supplier. And then finally, the step 3, we are trying to help organizations understand what are the risk mitigation measures that they can use in the short term, medium term, long term. And the long term, then we have the sourcing location optimizer and supply discovery, which will help them take long term risk measures. Now, let's understand how each of these steps are more defined and what is the approach of Barrow, right, to address that. In the first stage, which is tariff monitoring, we are tracking almost HS codes for 2,500 categories that we cover on a daily basis. These HS codes level data is being pulled from custom websites, trade portals, bulletins, and journals published by the governments so that the data is more authenticated and credible enough. The data is being pulled using AI-driven approach and then validating by the specialist, because there are multi-level of duties and tariffs that have been applied. For example, there is an additional tariff, there is a reciprocal tariff, and there are specific tariffs for products such as fentanyl products, or in case like steel and aluminum based tariffs. So hence, understanding tariff becomes more critical and pivotal to even quantify the impact at a category level internally in the organizations. Now let's do a poll with the audience to understand what they feel.
Great. Thank you once again, Shailesh. That was a great overview of how tariff monitoring can actually help businesses stay ahead and stay prepared. You should see a poll on your screen shortly. Again, please do take a moment to vote. We'll wait for around 30 to 40 seconds. Looking ahead, what will be your top priority to strengthen supply chain resilience against tariffs and other disruptions? Understanding the true cost impact of tariffs, diversifying suppliers across regions, optimizing sourcing locations for cost, risk, and ESG, embedding resilience clauses in supplier contracts, and lastly, leveraging technology or AI for faster intelligence and decisions. It's always good to see where organizations are planning to focus their energy going forward. So probably we'll wait for 5-7 seconds more and then we'll close the poll. And again, please wait for a few seconds so that the results can get processed and come to us. All right, thanks again, everyone. Let's close the poll now and see the results that we have got. Okay, I think this is no surprise. Optimizing sourcing locations for cost, risk, and ESG has topped the list this time. And this is a big one indeed. Location choices are becoming as strategic as supplier choices. Now, Anthony, let me come to you for this one. You work closely with businesses on sourcing optimization and resilience. What's your take on these results?
So, Sunny, what we have seen, the poll results truly resonates what we have been hearing from our user community and our industry experts. So, over the short term, people were looking more into the cost, but as a long term and future plan, they are looking at optimizing their sourcing location and going beyond just the unit price by balancing the cost, risk, ESG. So this is truly in line with what we have been hearing in the market and truly resonates with our solution, the sourcing location optimizer, which we would be talking at the later point.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Now let's go back to Shailesh and see how these tariff shifts translate into real cost impact. Shailesh, back to you.
Thanks, Sunny. So monitoring, right, in the first phase tells you what has changed, right, for sourcing, while the impact analysis focuses on what it means, right, for the business. So what we do in Barrow is trying to quantify the impact at both levels. One is direct sourcing, and as well as what is the indirect impact in case you're sourcing something for your contract manufacturing suppliers and they are buying from outside. It starts with connecting your spend data, the product categories at HS code level with the tariff that's been applied to quantify and propose the tariff situation at your category spend level. It's being provided in interactive dashboards in a Power BI or a Tableau so that it can be even ingested within the organization with the tools that they're using. We also are building the functionality to simulate scenarios. For example, it will not only show you the current level of tariff and the impact on your spend, but also it will focus on basis the discussions and the trade discussion that's happening between US and other governments, what would look like the impact of tariff in an optimistic scenario when certain deals have been reached. Right? For example, in India and US have been actively discussing right on the deal. So if they achieve a discussion and kind of agree on certain level of tariff, which is currently at 50%, say to a 20% or so, that will become an optimistic scenario. While in the pessimistic scenario, we are also loading with the worst case scenario that in case the trade escalation further exacerbate, then what is going to be impact on the level of your spend. All of these data, right, especially at the tariff level, is being updated in a real time, which means if the governments announce any tariffs today, it will get updated tomorrow, and the dashboard gets updated accordingly to show the impact on your spend. Now let's understand that how do we do the indirect or deep tier assessment, because tier one or a direct impact of tariffs is very easy. In the next slide, we are talking our approach to understand the impact of tariff at deep tier assessment. What we do, we breaks down first the product into the components using a custom in-house engine, which uses, right, to create the cost components by product. Once the cost components is achieved, at second level, it assigns the cost weightages or mass composition to understand what each of those components measure in terms of product cost. Then at the third level, when we understand that if that product is being sourced in US for that specific component slash material, what is the level of US as a country? Is it a net exporter country or a net importer country? If it's a net importer country, we understand where it's sourcing more from a trade perspective, and then we apply that level of tariff, right, from the that rests under the central data warehouse to provide a rolled up cost view at a final product level. So this 5-stage process breaks down the impact of tariff across the supply chain in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to provide an impact at product level. Let's understand that what it means, right, with a visual representation which is covered in the next slide, where we have kind of broken down a material cruelty which typically CPG and pharma companies buy, and it breaks down at first tier 1, which is quantifying some material at tier 1 level, which is diluent, filler, and it goes till active ingredient, right, operative white coating, etc. So you can see how the cruelty in US has been broken down to sub materials at tier 1 level. Now, if you see the top elements, which are the first 6, they are actually raw materials. So these have been sourced either from outside, like country like China and France or Ireland, or they are being sourced locally from US. In those cases where it's sourced from US, there is no tariff, which is 0%, which we can see in the middle of that. While you can see a tariff of active ingredient at 55%, which is coming from China, while diluent and filler is coming from France, which attracts 10% tariff today. If you go down, the operative white coating is a product, not a material. So the LM engine further breaks down it into subcomponents, which are titanium dioxide, polyethylene glycol, talc, and polyvinyl alcohol. Now these materials, and the top 3 materials, they are coming from outside in this case. So titanium dioxide is supplied by Japan, which is the largest exporter. It attracts 10% tariff today, while polyethylene glycol comes from China, which is attracting 55% tariff. While if you look at polyvinyl alcohol, which is again being sourced US, but it's a product. So further, the LM engine breaks down it further into tier 3 components, which is acetic acid and ethylene. Now these are last level raw materials, and then we assess the trade status, which says that US is a net importer of these products, and typically it comes from China, and then it attracts 55% tariff. Now, when we baked in, right, when we rolled up this, apply this tariff into the unit cost of these cost components, you get an impact of at product level, which is currently 30.4% for this cruelty material. We will look into this in detail in the demo in the later part of presentation, but essentially it gives you a high level view about how we are going to present this. With this, let me start giving a demo on the tariff monitoring. How do we capture, and what is the level of information that's being covered? And the second is then covering a demo on the impact, how we're quantifying it. Can I please get the access to share the screen? Thanks. So what you can see in my screen is an MS spreadsheet, right, talking about how we are monitoring the tariffs. So if you could see the first column B, right, captures exporting country. In this case, it's United States or China. The importing country being any of those countries from Canada, Mexico to China, Vietnam, Malaysia. We have covered, for example, energy and utilities, and within that, what are the subcategories from electricity, natural gas to PV panels, modules. We have assigned HS code. You can see those SH codes. And then we are highlighting what is the new rate and then what was the previous rate. So if you could recall, when the tariffs were implemented on Canada and Mexico, it started with 10 and 15, 25% in March. But basis a discussion, some of those have been pulled down to zero because those are exempted under USMCA. While you can see the impact right in China in the middle, you can see those that right now new rate is 10%. But if you recall, around May and June, it was as high as 125%, 145%, because that time the discussion was still happening between China and US. And then you can get an understanding of the status, whether those implementation have been done or not, what was the effective date of tariffs, along with the description and certain details about that. So for Canada and US, we mentioned because the rate is zero. Why it is zero? Because these are exempted under the USMCA broader framework. While for China, the truce has been extended till November 9th of this year, and so on and so forth. Now let me take you to the impact assessment dashboard. So here you can see this is the Power BI, right? We do it in other visualization tools as well. Just in the interest of this demo, we are just showing this in Power BI format. Now this tool captures the impact of spend of tariffs at spend level. So let me first take you to the detailed view. In the detailed view, you could see what I'm buying, right? Right now, it's a pharma specific sample, right? And we can see the countries of sourcing as Canada, China, and US. So if I want to look at what is the level of tariff right on Canada, where I'm buying cartons from, I can see the previous spend was 13 million. The current level of tariff is 25%. Because of that, that spend has changed to 16 million. In the optimist situation, what would happen? We are still expecting it to be 25% because that's what we could gauge from the language in the news announcement that happened between US and Canada. But if this kind of escalates further, we are expecting a 35% as a pessimist scenario. And in that case, the impact on spend will increase further to 17.8 million. Let's look at China, for an example. Now in China, you can see in this sample, we are buying cold form foil and cartons from that. Cold form foil today attracts 30% tariff, right? Where my spend earlier was 3.9 million. Because of this 30% tariff, it has increased to 5 million. And when we look at optimistic, we are expecting this to continue at 30%. We are not expecting it to go down. While in case the truce ends and there is no trade deal happen, it could even increase to 50%. And that would mean another, 0.8 million of impact on the spend and increasing it to 5.7 million. While we look at the US, because you're sourcing within US, now these are the indirect impact or the deep tier impact. And let me take you to help you understand how we have calculated that. For that, I will take you to the different sheet in the same tool, which is where we are showing the tier level impact assessment. Right now, you can see these for 4 products: auto injectors, Leolox syringes, which is a type of disposable syringe, operative white coatings, plasma light electrolyte solution. So if I click on auto injector, I can see 2 variations that I can play with. One is new impact at unit price level, and the second is total spend. Let's understand at unit price. So unit price, the last year price or before tariff, the price was $8 per unit. Now, because of the tariff, at supply chain level, this has increased to 9.46. And we are quantifying the impact at tier 1, tier 2. What does it mean in terms of unit price, which at dollar level? At the below, you can see the percentage impact. The overall impact at auto injector is 18.2%, and which is broken down into tier 1 at 10.5, while tier 2 impact is 7.1%, followed by 0.58% at tier 3 level. I can see at spend also, right? It's a sort of a refresh tool. Once you click on total spend, you can just see my spend earlier was 3.7 million, but because of tariff, right, 18.2% increase, I will have to pay 4.38 million. And then what is the level of impact in dollar value at different stages of value chain. Now let me show you how we have arrived at and what has gone behind this. So at the bottom, you could see a detailed table. On the left hand side, it gives you the first tier 1 level cost components. So auto injectors made of outer casing, syringes, compressed spring, needle, etc. Right? And when I expand this, I can see the level 2, which is as acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, polycarbonate, and EPDM blaze elastomer. The further thing that you are seeing within each of this is the tier 3, which is acrylonitrile, in this case butadiene and styrene, because that's make acrylonitrile butadiene styrene. And then when I go towards right, I can see at tier 1, outer casing constitutes 21% to the product cost of auto injectors. But at tier 1, because it's being sourced again locally, this is 0% tariff. So outer casing being sourced from a supplier within US, and hence there is no level of tariff. Now when we go to the level 2, which is looking at acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, here you can see the tariff has been applied 30%, because in this case this material is coming from outside, and that country attracts today 30% of tariff in US. And then there is no impact at tier 3, because that product is already sourced from outside, so there's no need for applying further tariff. I can see another case. Let me just show you. If I need to look at polypropylene EPDM blend, right here I can see the tier 3 components at diene monomer, ethylene monomer, etc. And here there is no level of tariff at tier 1 and tier 2. The tariff applies at tier 3 for certain components. So diene monomer and Ziegler Natar catalysts are coming from outside, right, outside of US, and they attract 30% tariff. When you apply this 30% of tariff at the price constituent, you can see what is the unit cost impact at this. So 0.07 and 0.13 is the revised cost from tier 2 to tier 3. You can see the change right here. Similarly, I can see this for other cost components as well, whatever I want to see. For example, if I want to see this for needle shield, right, cover, I can expand that. First level is polypropylene, which is tier 2 in this case, and then polypropylene. But polypropylene is coming from outside, which is attract 30%. So you get a rolled up view. Let's see a few more simulations. So I can then hop to Leolox syringes. This gets updated. I can see my spend. I can then juggle between unit price as well. You can see syringes were costing about 0.53 per unit, but that increased cost is now 0.79, and it's a 49% impact, huge impact. But the most of the impact is coming at tier 2 level. And then you can see for operative white coatings, earlier price was 35.59. Now it's at increased to 38.4 G, right, per kg. But the net impact is only 8% compared to other. While for plasma light, which is an electrolyte solution, the net impact is 17%. And the price is changed in this fashion. This will help you understand the impact at sub tiers, because in a lot of cases, organizations buy these products from contract manufacturers, and those contract manufacturers may be sitting in US. You would not know what products components they're sourcing from outside and how does that impact the cost. So to understand and negotiate in a transparent and better manner, you would need to understand the deep tier impact assessment, and this is how you get it. Now, when we combine this direct and indirect impact, right, at an org level, you could see at different drill down features. So right now, as a sample, we have just loaded a small spend of 93 million, but because of tariff, right, impact, it is currently showing me a 106 million impact, and you can see a tariff 13.85 is the net impact. Highest level view impact is on medical devices. China is the country where the maximum impact, for obvious reasons, because it attracts high duty, and the category that is has high impact as Leolox syringes. The average impact at my spend level at an org level is 14.96%. If I scroll down, I can see how the spend is divided between locals versus international buying, 32 versus 67%. The impact by country, for now we are only using Canada, China, and US as an example. It can be done for any country in scope. You can quantify the impact, see at each country level, you can hover and then see impact. Like 9% is impact on US, and you can see an impact on China sourcing is 29%. While on Canada, it's 25%. If you scroll down further, you can see the impact of tariff by BU level, at a supplier country level, at a category level. So, for example, in excipients, I am seeing the maximum impact. I can see packaging also has higher impact, and this is an sort of a flexible chart where I can see which are the top 5 impacted categories. Right now, I'm seeing 8. I can change it to 5. I can see the top 5. It gets updated. And if you have more categories loaded, you can see 20, 30 in the different proportion. I can apply the filter from left hand side. So right now I'm looking at BU. If I'm interested in BU level idea, so I can click on medical devices. The dashboard gets updated. So for medical devices, my spend is 7 million. It's getting highly impacted, and the impact is 32.46%, and syringe is the highest impact. And all the data points get updated to reflect medical devices BU. I can click on reset all, and it gets back right to the entire spend level. Now, interesting thing, if you can see on the top, right now we are seeing at current level of tariff, but based on our reading of the market and the discussion happening, we have created even an optimistic scenario. If you click on that, you can see the impact of tariff we're expecting is only to go down till 13.3, which is just a 1.5% positive impact. While in the pessimistic scenario case, if I click on this, I can see an impact increasing to 21.8%, which will be a much higher impact compared to the current scenario. And again, same level of data cuts are available. You can apply different filters from the left just to see the meaningful data. Another view that we have is at a country of operations. So in many cases, the category managers, leaders, director, they want to see impact at country level. So right now, as discussed, we have seen 3 country of operations: US, China, Canada. What it means, if you are buying product in the US and coming from outside in China and Canada, so on and so forth. If I click on US, I can see impact at US level, which is 11.79%, and then data gets updated. 63 million was the total spend earlier, but because of tariff, the impact is now going to be 70 point something, and 7.3 million is the actual impact of tariff. And I can see all that data specific to US operations. And you can see these, the operator white coating is the highest impact because it's coming from deep tier or impacted supply chain level, while cartons are coming because of direct impact. Auto injectors, again, indirect impact, which I've shown you earlier, and so does Lulox syringes. I can see this for China as an operations as well. So if I click on China, you can see China has a 49% impact. And if I go to the Canada, you can see that impact as well, which is 35%. So you can see even apply filter from left, or you can put reset all just to go back to the previous stage. With this, I'm handing over to the presentation back to my colleague Sunny.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. Very helpful demonstration of the dashboard. This really helps us in understanding the clear impact of tariffs in our supply chain and actually take smart actions because of the visibility. So I think now we can go back to our presentation and talk about the next section on risk mitigation, starting with short and medium term defenses. So back to you, Shailesh.
Thanks, Ali. So organizations, how we are helping them in the short term by understanding the direct and indirect impact of tariff. We are equipping organizations to understand the exact impact, which can be used to negotiate with the existing suppliers and agree temporary pricing adjustments. While in the medium term, we can suggest, or we are helping them create negotiation levers and the fact pack, which can help them negotiate with the supplier in terms of managing the cost of buying. Further, we are also kind of preparing cost structure, tariff clauses, and pricing mechanisms, which they can introduce in the contracts and can help mitigate this impact in the medium term. To understand the impact of long term, I'm passing this to my colleague Antony, who will take you through this now.
I think we lost Antony for a second there. Antony, can you hear us? Antony did tell me that he may encounter power cut in his area. So probably he'll join us back any moment. What we
Let me
can do
continue, Sunny,
now.
then.
All right, all right. Probably we can
Yeah.
go to the previous slide and then take it from there. But long-term
Sure.
approaches.
Yeah, from a long-term perspective, what we are trying to, how we are trying to help clients is to understand that let's not get into any knee-jerk reaction, which is because of sudden hikes, vulnerability in supply chain. Procurement teams are forced to get into a firefighting mode, and they are where their cost structures are exposed to reactive supply strategies. Ento, I think Ento is back. Ento, do you want to
Yeah.
take it from there?
Yeah, thanks, Shailesh. So from a long-term risk mitigation approach, what we need to look into it is from two steps. One is finding the best fit optimal sourcing location, which is based on the business strategy, be it combining cost, resilience, risk, or sustainability. And additionally, looking at the best fit suppliers or expanding the supply base in these locations, which would ensure that in the short term, you get the cost benefit, and also in the long term, it strengthens your overall competitiveness. Now, this is where we talked about that tariff should be looked as a trigger, because in the short term, the procurement teams are going into a firefighting mode. They are looking into it from a cost perspective and ensuring that the supply is available. But if you look into it from a broader landscape, tariff is just one of the factors which should be looked into. There are other parameters like geopolitical tension, the logistics bottlenecks, which could affect your overall supply availability. And then ESG mandates, which was always a good to have or a fancy term, which was looked by the procurement teams as no more a fancy term or a good to have option. In most cases, it's already embedded into the overall business strategy, and hence it is very essential that you look into the ESG score or the sustainability parameter while looking at suppliers and alternate geographic locations. Moving forward, so this is where we talked about the two strategies, right? One is to identify the best fit location, and the second is to identify suppliers in these locations to both manage the cost and also from a resilience perspective. Now, coming to the sourcing location optimizer. Now, the sourcing location optimizer is a simple tool which we have developed, combining 20 years of Bureau's research capability and combining it with the trusted data partners and third-party sources that we have partnered with. Now, our sourcing location helps you identify the best fit location to source from for 15 key economies. Now, some of the use cases or the advantages where the sourcing location optimizer could be useful for our procurement folks is it helps us in an early opportunity identification. It narrows down the top 10 suppliers using the business objective that you are looking into, and makes it much more simpler for you to make a much more calculated decision. Secondly, it looks into the total value and not just a unit price. While we understand that unit price still remains a very critical factor, what we understand is that when you look into an optimal sourcing location or trying to expand your sourcing geographies, you need to balance cost with risk, lead time, and sustainability. And our tool does that. Now, it also allows you to customize the result. Now, because we understand a one single fit solution doesn't meet all the users or the procurement users requirement. So the tool allows you to apply internal factors, adjust the weightages for you to get the best fit countries or the best fit geographies based on your input criteria. What it additionally does is, based on the strong data-driven decision model that we have, it helps you to adjust or simulate the different custom scenarios, change the weightages across the different parameters before you finalize on the shortlisted recommended countries. Now, before you make the final call, we also would allow you to have one quick side-by-side comparison between your incumbent sourcing locations and the recommended sourcing location, because then it allows you to understand what is the trade-off before you make the final decision of whether to stick with the incumbent country or whether to expand to a new geography. Now, our tool SLO is morely designed with the procurement folks in mind. Now, we didn't want to make it into a very complex calculative tool, and our focus was always to keep it very simple because the objective is to get a quick data-driven decision. Now, in 3 quick, simple steps, the tool allows you to get into your final objective or find the shortlisted set of countries. The first one is inputting your priorities, which includes adding your selected set of categories, subcategories, and your destination countries. The second is to run the optimizer by choosing your goals and balancing out the weightages across the different parameters. And third is to review and analyze the shortlisted or the recommended countries and make any adjustments by including additional parameters if required. Moving forward, the next step of finding a supply chain resilience is finding the supply discovery. Now, with our AI-enabled supply discovery module, the users get access to over 220 million suppliers, which can be filtered based on your criteria or based on different criteria like your category, your region, and the supplier type. Now, our smart filters further helps you to narrow down the suppliers by their operating location, the headquarter location, or their presence across multiple geographies. Now, what our supplier discovery tool does is it gives you access to not only this entire list of suppliers, but also allows you to go deep dive into each of their suppliers, understand their supplier capability, which helps you in understanding or reviewing them further. Now, it also gives you access or a list of similar suppliers to ease your search list. Now, to further ensure that each research or each search is given with the relevant and reliable output, we have our Bureau's own analyst validated shortlist added to our supply discovery module, which further enhances the quality of the output. Over to you, Sunny.
Great. Thank you very much, Antony, for your insights. What we can do now is quickly go to Shailesh and check his thoughts on supplier discovery. Shailesh, would you like to add anything here, especially in regard to teams, and if they would like to do any analysis after finding the suppliers using the supplier discovery module?
Absolutely. So I think after this stage, you will get a list of suppliers, relevant suppliers, but the category teams also need to assess their capacity, right? Their level to meet the specification of the products that they need to source from, as well as other technical and financial requirements to understand the qualified suppliers. We can also help with that, but I think it is a step needed after the supplier discovery stage.
Great. Thank you very much, Shailesh. Antony, I think we can now go straight to the demo in the interest of time and showcase to our audience sourcing location optimizer and very quickly supplier discovery.
Sure, Sunny.
Great.
So hope everyone is able to see my screen.
Yes, it's visible.
Now, like we discussed, the sourcing location optimizer is a tool designed to keep the procurement teams make smarter decisions at a faster pace while finding the optimal sourcing location for your best fit countries. Now, the tool helps you in 2 use cases. One, the tariff tracker, which helps you stay updated on the most recent updates with regards to tariffs. Now, this gives you a quick snapshot on the tariff changes and the affected countries and categories in a simple, easy to access manner. The second is the sourcing location optimizer, which helps you find the best fit country based on your inputs. Now, to start with the tool, you could choose from a selected list of categories. Just give me a minute.
Sure, no problem.
So what the tool does is it has input information that is available for 15 major geographies and 750 plus HS codes, which allows you to select any of these categories and find the optimal sourcing locations for these 15 geographies for the HS codes that you have selected. Now let me just relog into my tool for a minute.
No problem at all. And I think, Anthony, it's all about turning complexity into clarity when we're choosing where to choose from, what kind of suppliers do we need to select. I think Anthony is taking a moment to log into the tool. And while Anthony does that, Shailesh, let me come back to you quickly on this. What we have also seen through questions is that there is an interest in understanding about the volatility and how do you see it evolving over the next 6 to 12 months. What do you think about that very quickly while Anthony is joining in?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think volatility is likely to persist in the next 6 to 12 months because there are discussions going to happen between US and other governments, and tariff policies are expected to revise and be updated. Further, we are expecting more protectionist trends to safeguard local industries across countries. We are also likely to see some economic shift, like slowdowns in some major countries globally, which could also impact the current trade dynamics.
Okay, great. Thanks for your insights, Shailesh. So Anthony is back. Maybe Anthony, you can quickly share your screen and showcase the demo.
Sure, Sunny. So sorry for the inconvenience caused. So like we were discussing, you could choose any selected set of categories from your drop-down list. The HS codes are manually filled or pre-filled so that it avoids any unnecessary delay in terms of error or any delay. The next is choosing your destination country. You can choose from a drop-down list of pre-filled 15 countries. And then you could choose your current sourcing countries. So let me enter a few sourcing countries here for the convenience. We click on the next. And the next step is to give an indicative share of your sourcing percentage from these locations. Let me enter these percentages. Now, as we move into the tool, this is where the first level of simulation or the scenario building comes into the picture, where you can define your sourcing goal. Now, we have three options, which is pre-filled option, which is the best cost country, nearshoring, or the sustainable sourcing. Additionally, if you would like to include your own custom weightages, you could also play around with the custom weightages. Now, let me just choose nearshoring as a case over here. You run the optimizer. The tool will take a few seconds to read your inputs and list the top 10 countries based on an index score across these 5 parameters of cost, availability, lead time, country risk, and sustainability. Now, the summary report gives you the top countries and their relative index score, whereas the detailed report gives you the underlying data across each of the 13 parameters that runs this tool. Now, what we also are able to see is that your incumbent countries are highlighted in green and all the newly recommended countries are highlighted in purple. Now, one other feature like we discussed is a quick comparison between your incumbent country and any of the sourcing countries that you want to decide. Now, what we could do is you could choose between, let's say, India and France, China and France in this case. And then you go to the comparison tab. What it helps you is it gives you a quick comparison to see how each of these countries vary. Now, when you look into it from a parameter perspective, we see that from a lead time or availability perspective, there's not much to differentiate between France and China. From a lead time perspective, China performs much better than France, but from a country risk perspective, France ranks relatively better than China. So this gives you a quick side-by-side comparison between any of the recommended countries. Now, coming back to the tool, the next level of simulation where you can customize the output is going to the custom factor. Now, what we have provided here is there are two options. One is you could add any of your internal customers, internal score, let's say supplier confidence score. You could assign a weightage. Let's say we assign a 15% weightage. Include the score for each of the countries as needed. So if you don't have the score, you could always enter 0. Then you get the choice of configuring the custom weightage or auto adjust the weightage so that the total calculation again gets into the score of 100. Now, this is the first level of simulation that you, or the scenario building that you can have. Additionally, let's say that you are favoring sourcing it from China, and hence you want to add a favorability score into China. At the same time, you, based on your own business decision, you are looking to not look at Germany for now. You could add a penalty score to Germany and then run the optimizer. Now, what it does is you can see that the China scores goes up and the Germany goes down because it factors in the new score or the new parameter and also the confidence score that you associated with each of these countries. And in this way, you would be able to quickly customize the ranking by including your additional parameters also. The second part of the supply chain resilience was discovering additional suppliers. Now we have linked our supply discovery tool to the sourcing location optimizer, which helps you identify the suppliers in a quick manner. Now, let's say if I'm looking at bottles as a category now, I can choose glass bottle manufacturer. I can choose the type of supplier that I want. Am I looking at a distributor or am I looking at a manufacturer? I can look at the countries which is recommended. Now, one of the countries that we had recommended or got shortlisted was China. Let's see from China how the suppliers look like. Now, by quick look by entering the criteria, our supplier discovery search engine lists all the suppliers meeting the criteria of glass bottles and having their presence in China. Now, it gives you a long list of all the suppliers that you could look into. You could go into any of these suppliers in detail to see their capabilities in much more detailed fashion. You can also see all the products or the product portfolio that they have, and also see similar companies or closest competitors having a similar capability over here. And hence, the second part of your supply chain resilience by adding or identifying suppliers and shortlisting them can be done through our supplier discovery module. Over to you, Sunny.
Thank you, Anthony, for the demo. And it clearly shows that location strategy not only acts as your tariff shock absorber, but also a long-term safeguard for resilience. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. And we are also almost out of time, but I think we can take a couple of questions very quickly. So I'll direct the questions to either Shailesh or Anthony. Let me take one for each of you. Okay, so this one is for you, Shailesh, very quickly. With respect to deep tier tariff impact assessment, is it only US focused or it can cover other geographies too?
Yeah, we can cover other geographies as well. We just showed US as a sample today.
Okay. Let's take one more. Anthony, are you there?
Yes, Sunny.
Okay, so this one says that does sourcing location optimizer cover all categories and regions, or is it only for specific industries, materials, etc.?
Sunny, the sourcing location optimizer currently covers categories which has more than 750 HS codes as part of the tool coverage right now. But from a regional coverage as a destination location, we have currently limited it to 15 major economies, which have been selected based on our the major economy sizes and where the final trade routes are being redirected to. So in the current phase, yes, from a location perspective, the destination location is limited to 15 countries, but from a category coverage, it covers more than 750 to 900 HS code categories.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Antony, for the answer. And this brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you to both Shailesh and Antony for sharing all these insights today. And a big thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us today and for your questions. We hope you found the webinar useful and informative. Coming to the next steps, if you would like a custom demo, you can scan the QR code on your screen to reach out to us. We'll also be sharing the session recording and additional resources with you shortly. On behalf of Bureau, thank you once again for joining us today. Stay resilient, stay informed, and do look out for our upcoming webinar on supplier discovery. What you saw today was just a teaser, and we'll go much deeper in that dedicated supplier discovery session. Goodbye and have a great day ahead. Thank you.